All right, welcome back to FYI. I'm your host, Gil Rogers, and today we are joined by Brian Piper, the Director of Content Strategy and Assessment at the University of Rochester. We're here to talk about his new book, Epic Content Marketing for Higher Education: How to Connect with Students, Alumni, Faculty, Staff, and Others to Build Trust and Reach Your Institutional Goals. Brian, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Gil. It's a pleasure.
Awesome. Well, so Brian, you've been on the podcast before. We've talked about content marketing. I know and for our podcast viewers on YouTube, they see a book in the background titled Epic Content Marketing on your screen. This is somewhat of a follow-up book, right? Or an additional edition. So I'd love for you to first, for folks who have not necessarily listened to our prior episode, give us a little bit of your background, how you got to where you are, and then tell us a little bit about the next iteration of this topic.
Excellent. So I won't go through the entire process because people can always go back and listen to the other podcast episode. But basically, I started as a website developer, but wasn't super talented. So they kept pushing me onto the content side of the website, content strategy, SEO optimization. Started doing that back in 96. And then in 2013, I read the first edition of Epic Content Marketing by Joe Polizzi and thought, this is what I want to do. You can build trust with an audience by giving them content that is helpful for them. And eventually they will grow into fans and potentially, become purchasers, consumers of your content, your products. So then I started speaking at various conferences, started talking at Joe Polizzi's conference, Content Marketing World. And in 2020, I got to spend some time with Joe and kept asking him when he was going to do a second edition of Epic Content Marketing. And he asked me to co-author that with him. So that came out in March of 2023. And, working in higher ed, the whole time I was writing the second edition and working on that, I kept thinking about all the opportunities that we have in higher education. We have so many stories among all our different audiences that we're trying to connect with. And there just didn't seem to be a lot of content marketing going on in higher ed. And our entire reason for being is to pass along knowledge and to help people with their problems and to put people in better situations. So I thought, this is a book that needs to be written. So that's when I decided I'm going to do another edition of this that is focused specifically on the higher ed vertical.
Awesome. Yeah. And for a point of order for our podcast listeners, we'll put the link to your prior episode in the episode notes. So feel free to go back, listen to that one after this one, then come back and listen to this one again. And we'll get into this nice vicious cycle of listening to Brian and I talk, and it will be great. So for the layman who might be listening, right, who is kind of new in their role, or maybe trying to reinvigorate their efforts when it comes to demand generation for their institution, we'll call it, right? We're in a interesting time where, if you read the mass market headlines, demand for higher education is declining, and yet every institution reports record-breaking number of applications every year. So clearly something's got to give. But for an institution who's looking to grow their enrollment, you can help with, and this is toward the beginning of the book, help with defining what content marketing really is.
Yeah. So we are all content creators, especially in higher ed. We put a lot of content out into the world, whether it's, news or social posts or emails. So what actually takes content and turns it into content marketing? There's three things. First of all, it has to be valuable information that you're distributing. It has to be targeted at a very specific audience. And then it also has to be encouraging that audience to eventually take some sort of action, whether that is, signing up for more information or even just consuming more content. You're trying to get that audience to take some action. So content marketing is leveraging content to get an audience to know, like, and trust you so that will eventually become, part of your community. They'll come back to you. They'll opt into getting more of that content that you put out.
Yeah, and one of the things I posted on LinkedIn a couple weeks ago was, in my role outside of a podcast host, I advise ed tech companies on strategy and marketing. And one of the things we talked about, and I worked with one of my clients on, is the idea around you get more when you give, right? And I think that's a lesson that a lot of people have heard and learned, but have a hard time applying. And I get it, right? There's a lot of value in your insights, and for an educational institution, there's a lot of value in your product, which is the educational content that your students are consuming to further their skills, further their career. But a good content marketing strategy is employing exactly that, right? Giving away some of your intelligence, giving away some of your experience and your insights in the with the understanding that over time that's going to develop trust, right? And trust in your brand is then what makes it so that when someone needs something and you're the one that provides it, they pick up the phone and call you, or they go onto your website. In a more modern analogy, I guess, is probably a better term to use. But so I'd love for you to kind of help people to understand from a strategic perspective why there's such an imperative to really lean in on content marketing specifically for higher ed institutions.
Yeah, and content marketing is really all about building relationships and building trust. And there's such a need for trust in our society. And we see that, there are a lot of challenges that higher ed institutions are facing. And, one among those many challenges is, you know, people just don't see the value sometimes in higher education. There's a lot of conversations about whether it's worth it, especially as the prices continue to go up. And, there are some employers who, aren't making degree requirements, a mandatory part of their hiring process.
Mhm.
So creating that trust with your audience is critical. And the more we can do that before, a student actually comes to us, or a new faculty comes to us, and the more we can get our, you know, personality, our brand out there in the world in a way that is a trustable, reliable source of truth. I think that's critical. And as institutions, we have so many, different ways that we can showcase that trust, and we can build those relationships by connecting people, with the right audience, by helping them out with that very useful, valuable content, and just being a resource for them, whether or not they end up coming to our school or donating or, being involved with us. We just want to be able to provide that information and help them in their journey at whatever point they're at.
Grow your student community, help them stay, and encourage giving with Cadence, Higher Ed's premier engagement platform from Mongoose. Designed exclusively for higher ed by higher ed professionals, Cadence helps you engage your audiences with the perfect balance of AI and personal connection. Talk to students, parents, and alumni on their time and how they want. Empower your staff with integrated text and chat inboxes that gather all conversations in one place. Reach out to learn more about how our best-in-class service, support, and integrations have helped colleges and universities like yours have smarter conversations. From text to chat, make every message count.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you mentioned is the trust in just the value of the investment. And I think one of the challenges that institutions have right now is that in this economy and in this market, families are looking at cost benefit, right? And if it's the challenge is that, yes, a company might take bachelor's degree requirement off of a job description, but at the end of the day, they're going to be looking at the skills that are required for that role, and they're going to be looking at the experience that that person has. And so what's a way to demonstrate that is with a credential, right? And so that credential may not be a bachelor's degree. It might be stackable credentials. It might be certificates. It might be, but at the end of the day, higher ed institutions are still uniquely qualified to be the ones who are delivering that curriculum and delivering that mode, in different modalities. And I know one of the quotes that I submitted, self shout out, right, is that that institution, as preferences for modality are shifting, institutions can't just focus on the traditional tried and true first time full time undergraduate student, right? And so what is in that context, and we'll get to alumni and faculty and all that stuff in a moment, but for student recruitment and engagement, what are your thoughts around that exact challenge, right? With when all of our systems and all of our culture is around communicating and marketing to a traditional full-time first-time undergraduate student, but that's going to become less and less, or should become less and less of a share of the overall pie, right? And so what would you recommend institutions who are caught in that bit of a challenge?
Yeah, I mean, and the nice thing about content marketing is it's a long-term strategy. It's not something where you're pushing out a campaign, you're creating a whole lot of content all at one time and just trying to flood the market with, your push messages. It's really about thinking long-term about who your audiences are. So let's look at the non-traditional student. What are the problems that they're facing? What are the challenges that they have in their life? Why are they thinking about going back to school? Or if they're not, what could you do to encourage them? Here are certification programs we have. Here are alternative online courses that you can do in the evenings where you don't have to commit to coming onto the campus every day, that fit into their lifestyle, and then just start putting out content about those particular challenges and how there are options out there. There are ways to overcome those challenges. There are ways to progress your career. After you've been in a job for 15, 20 years, there are still things that you can do to increase your knowledge, increase your skills, and help yourself progress, down your career path. And it's just about finding out where those different audiences are going to be and then putting those messages out on those channels consistently. And it's just a matter of making yourself be a resource for them. You can still do all your traditional push marketing and really focus on your, undergraduate students, your traditional undergraduate students. But I think it's critical that we start thinking long term about ways that we can help these other audiences. And the best way to do that is by putting out content that helps them.
Yeah, and I think like let's dial in on alumni for a second, right? I feel like there's a cultural missed opportunity in higher ed in a lot of respects with personalizing engagement. You know a lot about your alumni. You know what college within your institution they graduated from. You know their GPA. You know what classes they took. You know what clubs they were a part of for the most part in many respects. So you know what interests that they had when they were there and what they did and how they enjoyed their experience. But then at the end of the day, for many institutions, the end game is just to get a donation every year, right? And that's a huge missed opportunity when it comes to continuous engagement. Because if you could imagine, and I've had many conversations. One past guest we had on was Charlie Melikar from Melikar Consulting. We spoke about the fundraising pyramid and how you have the large base of recent alumni at the bottom who are just starting out. That the goal for them is not necessarily to get them to give a big contribution, but to help them feel involved and help them be a part of the community. And then you got the tippy top; those are the people who are getting ready to put the school in their will and put their name on a building and all that sort of fun stuff. But then you have this huge group in the middle that is completely underserved, completely underutilized. And maybe those are the folks that don't donate $50 a year when they see the alumni newsletter, but have capacity to donate $500 a year, right? And so I think that that's an area where, for institutions, the challenges that the gift officers at the school and the alumni coordinators and all the people who work in those offices don't have the bandwidth to try to nurture and engage that giant group in the middle. However, there are ways to kind of scale that engagement and create a culture of community and a culture of continuous development. As an institution, again, we're uniquely qualified to be presenting skills and helping people upskill and helping them stay engaged. So from an alumni engagement perspective, what are some of your thoughts on some tactical things that an institution might consider when they're trying to build a communication, build a content marketing plan to keep that audience specifically engaged?
Yeah. And a lot of that is looking at, it all goes back to figuring out what your audience pain points are, what their roadblocks are, what problems are they facing in life, what problems are they facing in their careers, and how can we provide information, how can we provide content, how can we provide resources that will help them with that. So, whether it's putting out an article about, other networking opportunities that they can have to connect with other alumni within, the greater institutional network, or whether it's about lifelong learning opportunities that, the institution may create. There are a lot of institutions that are, creating programs specifically for this, where it's open to all alumni, all students, all faculty, where they can come in and learn about new topics. You could come in and learn about AI, where, there's no fee as long as you're part of that community. And it's really showing the value to all of those institutional members that there is value in this community, that there are offerings, that we do support you. There are ways for you to help existing students by providing mentorship opportunities. I think there are a ton of opportunities that we're just not taking advantage of. And you mentioned the amount of data that we have on our alumni. It would be so easy to take that data and figure out how to pair them with new students, or how to create opportunities for content around those areas of interest that are shared by particular groups. I think we can do a lot more targeting, and AI is going to help us with this. It's going to help us be able to aggregate that data and pull that data together so that we can see these areas of interest that we can, better focus on, create, better, more helpful content about, and then figure out how to distribute that to make sure that we're reaching those audience with it.
Yeah, and I think it goes the challenge being to break the culture of dear first name letter being the level of personalization that we have. And I think we've beaten that horse to death over the number of conversations that we've had, but that's not personalization. That's table stakes as far as just reaching that person and addressing that person. Personalization is understanding who that person actually is and tailoring your communications based off of those, and having timely interactions, right? I remember back when I was an admissions counselor, it was this revolutionary idea to have a section of the view book be tailored to what major that student had indicated they were interested in on the inquiry card at the college fair they filled out, right? And this was like, all that is mail merge printing, right? And so, but at the time, and this is dating myself and how old I am, at the time, that was a huge advancement, right? And kudos to the groups at the time, but we've moved beyond that. And I think that there's a reality of needing to ensure that we're continually adding value to our interactions to students, parents, alumni, faculty, whoever it is. We have a responsibility as educational institutions to help them to develop further. And I feel like one of the things that we've spoken about this on the past podcast as well is educational institutions are in a unique spot where you have this treasure trove of content and materials that you can give away for free and still generate value back to your institution. Because again, if you can get that $50 donor to give $500 or even $55, right? If you can get students to increase yield of your enrollment by 1 percentage point, if you can increase alumni giving overall by 1 percentage point, these are huge numbers when it comes to overall ROI on those efforts. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about measurement, right? When it comes to how institutions should really be thinking about that, because it is a long game, right? I think, there's so much of this like need for immediate return and saying, okay, well, how many donations did we get off of that, that one event, or how many enrollments did we get from that one think piece, right? And that's not necessarily the way we should be thinking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a lot of institutions reaching out to me and asking me, what should we be measuring? What should we be looking at? What data should we be collecting? And then I always say it depends. It depends on what your goals are, what you're trying to accomplish. And, you really have to break it down. So first you have to really clearly understand all your levels of goals, your institutional goals, your school goals, your department goals, like each one of those, and they have to be aligned. And then you can start looking at, all right, what are the objectives of this content marketing strategy? What are we trying to accomplish? And you break those down and do your key results. Then you can start looking at, those key performance indicators, those KPIs that you are going to pull together based on various different metrics. So if you're just looking to increase brand awareness, then it's fine to use those vanity metrics of like page views and, search rankings. But if you're looking to increase enrollment for a particular program, then of course, you're going to, measure enrollment. But people are always saying that it's very difficult to measure the impact of marketing, and especially content marketing. But there are lots of different ways that you can do that. So you can set up, tracking within your pages to look specifically at, how many viewers that come to this pages are following through on our call to action to go visit our department pages or go look at particular programs. And then how many of those are converting or asking for more information? How many donors do we get clicking on a story from a social post that we do that eventually filter through and donate more money? But part of the problem of that is that as higher ed institutions, we tend to be very siloed. Our data tends to be segmented out in lots of different spaces across the institution. So a lot of times it's very difficult to pull those numbers together. So it's a matter of working interdepartmentally with, we work very closely with admissions and advancement so that we can understand what they're trying to accomplish, how they're tracking that, what we can do to influence that. And then if we can see as we drive more traffic to their pages, to their programs, if there's an increase in, enrollment or admissions or, whether or not they're getting more donations. So it's just a matter of figuring out specifically why you're measuring something and what you're trying to prove with that measurement. And being able to connect those numbers to that final goal that you're trying to reach.
I love how you brought up being working cross departmentally, right? And I think that one of the sections in your book you talk about breaking down silos, and I feel like one of the big opportunities that is presented in the whole world of content marketing for higher ed specifically is that you're naturally breaking down silos at each phase of the process, right? Because you're not the faculty member who's in charge of the marine biology department, right? You're simply, and I'm sure Rochester probably doesn't have a huge marine biology department, but you are helping to evangelize that program, and you're helping to communicate that message. And you're the faculty member is not the expert in what the cadence of the communications need to be and what different channels they need to use to be able to talk about their program. But what they really are good at is delivering their material and teaching students and inspiring students to be and do their best work, right? And so you're at the beginning of this entire process, you're already breaking down silos with the academic side of the house. And then, downstream, water, stream, marine bio, we're getting there. But downstream, you are then connecting the dots across different departments, admissions, marketing, communications. And so for many though, that the biggest challenge is building those bridges and making those connections, right? So what are some methods that you use when you're trying to work on something, and maybe you're running up against a wall, or you're running up against a silo that is really working hard to be set, because people are protective of their work, and they might not understand what you're trying to do, and so what are some things that you do to break down those barriers?
Yeah, and it goes back to, content marketing works internally as well. So it goes back to figuring out what their problems are, what their roadblocks are, and how you can help them with those. So, one of the keys to effective content marketing for higher ed is being able to collaborate across the different groups. So you're not duplicating content. So you can find opportunities for cross promotion and collaboration. And a lot of times that starts off with offering to help. So if we're going to, work with a particular school or a particular department, we'll offer to come in and do a content audit for them and just make SEO recommendations or help them set up dashboards for their analytics. And then along the way, we'll start talking to them about the broader content marketing strategy and how we can help them create content. We can help them, rewrite some of their course descriptions in a way that may be, more relevant to their particular audiences. And really just offering to provide a resource or, kind of a center of excellence for them that will help them do their jobs better, help make things easier for them. We'll show them tools that we're using. We'll set them up with access to their data that makes it easier for them to see the impact of the work that we're doing. A lot of times when we do a website redesign for a department, we'll include a page in their dashboard that actually shows them the impact that the redesign had on their traffic, on their, time on page, all those sorts of, metrics that they're looking at and paying attention to. So it goes back to the heart of content marketing is making yourself a valuable resource and providing information and content that's going to be helpful and useful to them.
Yeah, you're building trust with those internal groups to then help them build trust with their external group, right? And I think that's marketing in a nutshell in a lot of respects, right? I one of the things I've written about and spoken about with just your marketing plan in general is you can't just execute your marketing plan and expect it to succeed. You also have to communicate internally and market your marketing plan so that the internal constituents who are really the ones who are going to be helping with implement it are on board as well. And so building trust with that internal audience to be a part of that creation of that content and the distribution and the measurement of that content is huge. And I think one of the, put your salesperson hat on and say, you go to the faculty member and say, what if I could help you find 10 additional enrollments for your program next year? Would that be something that you'd be interested in being a part of? For the most part, a lot are going to say yes, right? Some might say no, but we don't care about that. The good ones say yes, and they want their program to grow because they know that means funding and it means that they can continue to do their work, right? So, Brian, I appreciate you taking the time and being on the podcast again today. I reserve the right when you have another edition of the book to have you on, and we'll continue this conversation. But for those, again, who might not be connected with you already, what are some of the ways that they can get in touch with you?
You can go to my website, brianwpiper.com, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn or most other social platforms at Brian W. Piper.
Awesome. And for folks who want to pick up a copy of your book, I was blessed to get a super awesome advanced digital copy. My print copy is in the mail. Where is the best place for them to pick up a copy of the book?
You can also grab copies of the book at brianwpiper.com.
Awesome. Fantastic. All right. And the title of the book, Epic Content Marketing for Higher Education, How to Connect with Students, Alumni, Faculty, Staff, and Others to Build Trust and Reach Your Institutional Goals. Brian, we thank you again, and we will see everyone next time on FYI.
Thoughtfully nurture applicants, personalize retention efforts, and exceed fundraising goals with our Cadence Engagement Platform's text messaging solutions. Designed exclusively for higher ed by higher ed professionals, Cadence helps you engage your audiences with the perfect balance of AI and personal connection. We leverage an intuitively designed interface and easy-to-use texting templates so you can have targeted conversations or scale up to expand your reach. Our powerful smart messaging can respond automatically, exactly how you would. And to measure progress, track your campaigns with unparalleled reports and analytics. Effectively meet your community where they are as we proudly feature an industry-leading 95% read rate within 3 minutes. It's never been easier to make every message count.